afternoon. Thanks for joining us here on The Big Story. I'm Afrida Rahman Ali, and our top focus at this hour is on the order passed by a Delhi court as it was adjudicating on one of the cases related to the Northeast Delhi riots of last year. A Delhi court has pulled up the police over its investigation into one of the cases. The court slammed the cops, saying, and I quote, "When history looks back at the worst communal riots in Delhi since partition, the failure of the investigative agency will torment the sentinels of democracy." In its scathing comments, the court also noted that there was no real effort to trace eyewitnesses or the real accused, and the case appeared to have been solved merely by filing the charge sheet. The court added that there was lack of supervision by senior officers in the probe, and the investigation seemed to be a criminal waste of taxpayers' money, and the probe agency, all it was doing was trying to pull wool over the court's eyes. The Delhi court has discharged former AAP Councilor Tahir Hussain's brother and two others in this case. Remember, nearly 750 cases were filed linked to the Northeast riots. So there are, in fact, important questions that we need to raise on this issue. This is the second time, viewers, that the court has pulled up the Delhi police within a period of 2 days and over the same Delhi riots case. Remember, multiple cases filed, so there have been multiple instances of court hearing. This is just one such case that we are reporting about today. But just 2 days ago, the court made a similar observation. Now, in that case, the Delhi riots accused charged under 5 FIRs for the same arson crime. The High Court quashed 4 of them after making similar scathing remarks. The Delhi police, on its part, viewers would recall, made very tall claims about it earlier, saying that it's conducting a scientific, meticulous investigation. Police had given all details of video analytics and artificial intelligence being used for the investigation, while the court says quite the contrary. There is no proper scientific investigation. Only thing that the prosecution agency, that is the Delhi police, is doing seem to be filing of charge sheet after charge sheet without any substantive evidence that they have dug out. Even MOS Hold, in fact, told Parliament that a scientific examination was going on. So that is the government's position. The court says something completely, entirely different. Let me welcome Gautam Mukherjee, senior journalist, joining us this afternoon, is also Aarti Jairath, senior journalist, joining us. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Mr. Mukherjee and Aarti Jairath. Thanks for joining us. I want to begin with you, Gautam Mukherjee, because what you just heard, as we reported the facts as they are, from what the court has observed, it's literally like saying that, yes, we discharged these 3 people, but that is only because the prosecution has done a shoddy job.
Yes, well, you know, the court has its own procedures, and the police very often in a variety of cases can't seem to meet the requirements of the court in terms of absolute and incontrovertible proof. The riots, the number of the witnesses are turned. Much of the evidence on telephones and video are confusing, if not destroyed. The court process is long-winded. As we can see, it's a couple of years down the line, and here we are. This is nothing new. The court accusing the police and the police saying, look, we've done the best we can, seems to be a Mexican standoff over and over again in all kinds of cases.
Yes, but you know, the fact that the government, even the MOS, to say in Parliament that this is a scientific investigation, are you saying that those are empty words? And I'm afraid the court's observation is only based on the fact, if I may point out to you, even in this case, the police apparently showed 5 witnesses, 1 being the victim, the other the constable, 1 the duty officer, and a formal witness, only 1 formal witness and an investigating officer. Now, even a layman can tell that this is not how a case is built, Aarti Jairath. What do you make of this?
Well, I think the court has a point of view and the police has another point of view.
No, Aarti, may I just have a word in from Aarti? I'll come back to you, Mr. Mukherjee.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm afraid that, I think what the court is basically pointing out is something that we have suspected all along, and that is that the entire investigation into these riots was politically motivated. They were cross-examining university professors, filmmakers who have been critical of this regime and trying to implicate them in the riots. Ultimately they weren't able to because they weren't able to turn up evidence. They tried to implicate Aam Aadmi Party because it was a rival party and had won and just won the Delhi elections, defeating the BJP in a really, sort of savage manner. Again, without any real evidence, they were just picking up people. They actually did, there was so much pressure on the police from the central government that arrest people, file FIRs, solve this case, that I think the police just rushed to file FIR after FIR after FIR without doing due diligence, proper investigation, or actually, kind of finding witnesses. And mind you, they could have found witnesses. These were all areas that have been inhabited by people for decades. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody knew their neighbors. They knew who were involved in the riots. I don't think it would have been difficult for the police to actually pinpoint the perpetrators. They just didn't make an effort because the whole thing was politically motivated. It was politically driven. And that's why the cases are now falling flat in court.
Let me have Mr. Gautam Mukherjee respond to this. Mr. Mukherjee, what Aarti is saying now, of course, the court order would give a lot of credence to this narrative that this is politically motivated. There were wrong people, people falsely implicated. Aam Aadmi Party is being targeted. Their image is to be tarnished since they happen to be political adversaries. So after the court observation today, this kind of narrative is bound to gather steam.
I'm not so sure about that. When 53 people are killed outright and 1,800 are injured, there's much arson, there's much loss of property and business. It isn't something that happened out of thin air. If we're talking about political motivations and planning, then obviously somebody did all these things in Northeast Delhi. And you've got hotspots all over Delhi. You've got the JNU, you've got Islamia, Jamia, you've got, Shaheen Bagh, and then following on from there, the Northeast Delhi riots. Now, if AAP stands up and says, I'm blameless, I can't see the public buying it. As far as the courts are concerned, well, they have their learned judges and they have their opinions. But it is at the moment at the lower court stage. In fact, there was another ruling by the Supreme Court when 3 people of the Pinjra Tod were let off on bail. And they said, look, I hope this doesn't form a precedent of letting people off on bail. And by contrast, the lower court again let some 7-8 people off on bail because they said, I can't keep you in jail indefinitely. You've already been there a year. So you've got a very slow judicial system. You've got some degree of sloppiness, of course, in the police investigations, and you've got a lot of destruction of evidence.
But here the case is not about slow judicial system, Mr. Mukherjee. Here the case is about prosecution not doing a thorough job and not able to do due diligence, as Aarti was saying.
The court can say that. The police, on the other hand, have a different...
Please complete your point, Mr. Mukherjee.
Sorry, is that for me?
Yes.
Gautam Mukherjee, complete your point. I couldn't hear you earlier.
No, what I'm trying to say is the court has made a sharp criticism. It's not the first time, and it won't be the last. And it, quite apart from the riots, they did the same thing with the rapes, and it goes on and on. Now, the police have a different point of view. Perhaps police procedure isn't up to scratch, and that is something which is a much deeper subject.
Yes, and that is the problem though, isn't it? The fact is, Aarti, again, the other argument that is made here is that this is just one lower court observing on one specific case. Let's not make it about the entire Northeast Delhi riots, because those riots, as we all know, did happen and so many lives were lost. So are you going to say that let's not extrapolate this to mean that, you know, all of those people who were killed or the riots did not happen? Surely there was a lot of wrongdoing that happened over there and a lot of deliberate motive that was at play.
Look, can anybody deny that the riots did not take place? We all live in Delhi. We know exactly what was happening. Many of us visited the site. We saw the death toll. We saw the videos. Who's saying the riots didn't take place? Of course the riots took place. And a lot of people died and a lot of property was damaged and a lot of looting took place. And, you know, we know that. I don't think that's the point here. The point here is the police making a systematic effort to bring the perpetrators to book? And I'm saying they are not making a systematic effort because the probe is politically motivated. The riots were also politically motivated, but the riots took place. Obviously, they took place. And I'm saying that the probe is also politically motivated because basically they are going after their political opponents rather than looking for the guilty culprits. And I'm sorry, this has happened in the past before also. The 1984 anti-Sikh riots are a case in point where I don't know how many times inquiry committees have sat and investigated. They still, till today, so many decades later, have not been able to pinpoint the guilty who slaughtered all those thousands of Sikhs in broad daylight, in front of the police, in front of everybody. Why? Because again, the probe was politically motivated. They were trying to protect certain people, and that is why the guilty were never brought to book. And the same thing is happening now. So this is an old story, and it's got nothing to do with the slowness of the judiciary. In fact, this case, it's just about a year old. And, you know, it's already in the court. So I think that, you know, they have worked quite fast on it. And I'm not saying that this is true of every case, but the fact is that 2 cases in a row, the Delhi courts have taken this position. And even the Pinjra Tor people who were, you know, sort of rounded up and put behind bars for more than a year, the Supreme Court said something similar at that time too. So, I mean, I think there's something very fishy here. And if we don't see it, then, you know, we are being blind to, you know, this is blind justice.
Yes, Gautam Mukherjee, Aarti is making a point here when she's saying the idea is to protect the guilty. And therefore, you have a shoddy investigation. It's a deliberate agenda to do it this way. Because, you know, we are told by the Delhi police, 1,829 people arrested, 755 FIRs filed. Sometimes we are made to believe as if that's the be-all and end-all of it. That is what the police and administration is supposed to do. They're supposed to arrest and file FIR as if their job ends there. What about going beyond that and actually finding out who the guilty people are? Because, you know, we are thrown these numbers at us to say that, well, investigation is on in the Delhi riots case and the police is doing its job. The police's job does not end with making these arrests and filing these FIRs.
Well, if you notice, there's been one acquittal so far, and that has advanced pretty much the same, you know, arguments that your work wasn't done thoroughly enough. There is no actual evidence that I can work on, so I have to let this man go. So the point is, there seems to be a gap in the way the court sees this is happening and in the way the police see it is happening. To talk of political motivation in a vacuum only to back the one side is not borne out by the chap who got acquitted, for example. You know, quite often, or all these people who've got bail because they come from all sorts of communities. Now, the point is that how far can you just make it a police matter and flog them? It doesn't make sense. There is, or accuse the political authorities of playing it one-sided. How come a minority thick area like Northeast Delhi, Chandbagh, Silampur, this is where the riot takes place. Why does it coincide with Trump's arrival? Why do they sit down in front of the metro station and try to block the road in the first place, exactly like Shaheen Bagh? You know, it's a little facile to talk of, you know, political conspiracy or political, you know, persecution on the part of the government without owning up and seeing if one's own hands are clean. And to say AAP is blameless is ridiculous.
Yes, I take that point, but at the same time, we have to focus on the fact that the court is talking about the futility of this exercise. When 20% of the registered case that were received for trial, charges were framed only for 23% of those. Bulk of those people who are arrested are languishing in jail with no hope for bail because the provisions are too stringent against them, and with no hope for a trial. So this just goes on tariq pe tariq, as we know it happens in this country. The unfortunate part is the failure of the system, both on the prosecution side and, of course, to a great extent on the issue of how the under trial period just extends beyond imaginable limits. That becomes a bigger misfortune as well, especially for those who are not guilty and put behind bars. Thank you so much, Gautam Mukherjee and Aarti Jarat, for joining us this afternoon.